Goeiemôre vriende, ek hoop julle het 'n goeie nagrus gehad. Ons gaan vanoggend aan, session 39, Genesis 21, and we start with verse 3. And Abram called the name of the son who was born to him, whom Sarah had borne to him. He called him Isaac. In Hebrew, that is Yitzhak. So let's just look at why he did that. Did he call him Isaac because Sarah laughed? Or because he laughed? Or what was the reason he called him Isaac? Genesis 17, we go back a couple of years, a lot of years. And we also go back to the original promises that Yahweh made to Abraham. So let's look, Genesis 17:19, and Elohim said, Your wife Sarah truly shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. And I shall establish my covenant with him. And then he continues talking about the whole covenant that he has given Abram and his seed. What happened then? Yahweh promised the son. The first time Yahweh promised it, he only spoke to Abram, remember. Genesis 17:17. Then Abraham fell upon his face, and he laughed. And he said in his heart, Shall a child be born to a man that is almost 100 years old? And then he said to God that may Ishmael live before you. But God didn't, he wasn't satisfied with second best. He wanted Abram himself in his own seed as a miracle, to have the seed from the tree of life to go through Abram, and then through Isaac, and then through Jacob, and not through the other sons. So that's why Abram had to come out of the land of Ur. That's why Yahweh chose Jacob instead of Esau, why he chose Isaac instead of Ishmael, and so it goes on and on. Why he chose Joseph and Ephraim in front of Reuben, who was the firstborn. God sees in the heart, and he chooses the one that's got the seed, the word of God, the spirit of the tree of life in him, and not the seed from the serpent, who is not necessarily satanic, but even the brothers of our forefathers, the brothers that's born to the same men, could have the spirit, the words, the attitude, the doctrine of the serpent in them. It's not necessarily that you can point your finger and say it's satanic. We need to distinguish between the seed, the physical seed, and the spiritual seed. So Yahweh said to Abram that he must call his son Isaac. So when Isaac was born, he called him Isaac. Sarah laughed mockingly, remember, when she heard that she was going to have a son. Just before Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, the angels came to visit, remember, and God said Sarah will have a son by next year. So she laughs. But she laughed unbelievingly and mockingly and arrogantly. It wasn't a nice laugh. And Abram also laughed. Remember, he fell upon his face and he laughed, and he said in his heart, really? Will this really happen? So it was an unbelieving laugh. It wasn't a nice laugh. So the name Isaac means he laughs. In Hebrew, it's Yitzak. And Yitzak means he laughs. His name will be a constant reminder to both his parents, because they didn't really believe that Yahweh promised them a son, and that they will have a son in their old age. But as faithful as he is, he always uses that which man intended for bad, he uses for good. Laughter before Isaac was born, that laughter was done in arrogance and unbelief. But laughter after Isaac was born was in joy and gratefulness and awareness of a huge miracle that has happened. Look at this, Genesis 21:6-7. And Sarah said, God has made me to laugh. Now remember, how did she laugh when she heard the promise? She laughed in arrogance and in unbelief. And she even denied it. Remember, she lied when God said to her, but you laughed. And she said, no, I didn't. And he said, no, but you did. She even lied about it. So it was a bad laughter. And Isaac's name means he laughed. So it was a constant reminder of the unbelief they had, and the laughter they did, actually laughing in the face of God. If you think about it, very clearly. They were laughing in God's face, laughing at his promises. It wasn't a nice name, but God changed that, because now, afterwards, Sarah says, God has made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me, so that all that hear what? About this amazing miracle of a 90-year-old woman having a baby. And she said, who would have said unto Abraham and unto Sarah that she will have a children that will suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. So the laughter after the miracle has happened was a good laughter, a nice laughter. And hopefully the meaning behind the laughter in Isaac's name also changed from arrogance and unbelief. It changed to joy and belief and faith in this God that could make this amazing miracle happen. John 16:20, verily, verily I say unto you, that you shall weep and lament, but the world shall rejoice. You shall be sorrowful, but your sorrow shall be turned into joy. Beautiful, beautiful. Talking about the regathering in the book of Jeremiah, remember, Sarah is the mother of all nations, like Abraham is the father of many nations, and of course through Isaac, he's the father of many nations. So talking about this regathering, and we talk about the changing of laughter from unbelief to laughter of joy. Jeremiah 31:13, then shall the virgin rejoice in the dance, both young men and old together. For I will turn their mourning into joy, and I will comfort them, and I'll make them rejoice from their sorrow. So read the whole chapter of Jeremiah 31. It's all got to do with the regathering of the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Remember, that's scattered all over the world. So the bad laughter of Isaac was changed into a good laughter. And that is very prophetic also for his seed that will be scattered all over the world. But like Yeshua said in John 16, our sorrow shall be turned into joy. Because in the hand of the Messiah, the seed from the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob will be regathered and will be called again the sons of the living God. Psalm 30:11 and 12. You have turned my mourning into dancing. You have cast off my sackcloth and girded me with gladness, to the end that my glory may sing praise to you and not be silent. So all of this good laughter will be for the magnification of Yahuwah at the end of the day. The laughter that Sarah did afterwards was because God has done a miracle in her life. And that was a witness for her to other people, to tell them about the miracle so they can laugh with her. It's amazing. Same with us, when we will be regathered in the hand of the Messiah, and our sorrow will be turned into joy. Our laughter from sorrow will bring praise to Him for the miracles that He has done. So Genesis 21 verse 4, and Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God commanded him. So exactly, we see that Yahuwah has commanded something to Abraham, and Abraham doesn't forget. Once commanded, he keeps obeying that, because like Yahuwah said, when we talked about the sign of the covenant of circumcision, it is a perpetual covenant. It means it will last forever and ever. And what an amazing thing for Abram to do. Yahuwah promised him that in his seed many nations will be born. And he proved himself, God proved himself by giving Abram a son. So there's nothing less for Abram to do than to put the sign of this beautiful covenant, this promise that God gave him, to continue putting the sign on every child that is born, that is 8 days old. Genesis 21 verse 5, and Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. 100. Can you remember how old he was when we read Genesis 12? When Yahuwah spoke the very first time to him. Try and remember. Who of you can remember? Genesis 12 verse 4 and 5. So Abraham departed, as Yahuwah had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abraham was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarah his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all the substance they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan. And into the land of Canaan they came. So Abraham was 75 years old, and Sarah he then obviously 65. She was 10 years younger, when they got their very first promise of children from Yahuwah. Genesis 12 verse 2. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great. So the very first time that God promised to Abraham that he will have a great nation, that he will obviously have children, was when he was 75 years old. And we read in Genesis 21 verse 5, and Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born unto him. How long is that? It's 25 years. How long have you been waiting for something that God promised you? How long have you been praying for something specifically? Days, weeks, years? Abraham is just, and we'll see in the life of Isaac, and we'll see in the life of Jacob as well, and in the life of Joseph. What an example to us. For 25 years, and we know along the way that Sarah and Abram just, made their own plans with Hagar and Ishmael. We discussed all that. But still, they have been waiting and being faithful and following God wherever God tells them to go for 25 years. So maybe your 2 years or 3 years that you've been waiting, I don't hope it's going to take 25 years for your prayers to be answered. But let's get courage from the life of Abram and Sarah. And we know that whatever God has planned for you, it will come to pass, even if it does take 25 years. So verse 8 to 12 tells the story of this great feast that Abraham made for Isaac. And when he was weaned, that's probably at about 2 or 3 years old. And Sarah could see how Ishmael was bullying him and mocking him. And it's definitely worse than what we see our children do to each other. I wanted many times to send one of my sons, my boys, away because of the constant bickering and fighting between my two boys. But I mean, that's just frustration. I think in the case of Sarah, there was really a problem between the older brother Ishmael and the younger brother Isaac. I think it was a bit more than just brotherly mocking and fighting. Looking at Ishmael's descendants today, I can imagine that I think Sarah was afraid of Isaac's life. Genesis 21 verse 13. So, before we get to that, sorry. So Sarah said that Abram had to send Hagar and Ishmael away, and he didn't want to do that. But then God said to Abram, listen to your wife. And I want all the men to read the verse where God says, listen to your wife. But he said, send the woman away. And don't worry, Abraham, verse 13, don't worry, because and of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is your seed. So God has given a promise to Ishmael, and he's comforting Abram to say, listen, don't stress about this. Send them away, because in them symbolically, we have discussed this in length, the symbology of Hagar and of Ishmael being the root of our own flesh, making our own plans, believing our own doctrine, doing our own thing instead of listening and obeying God. So he says, it's fine, send them away. It's not the worst. So he sends them away, but with a promise. Because remember that God said to Abram, he will make of Ishmael a nation. And what is the difference between making a nation and, like he said, the promise he made to Abram, that was nations? Out of you will come many nations. remember? And a great nation will come out of you, and the families of the earth will be blessed out of you. So through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we are seeing many nations. But the promise God gives to Ishmael is only one nation. I will make a nation out of him. Because Ishmael cannot get the same promise as Isaac. Out of Isaac comes Israel. And Israel, with the seed of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in them, not any other God, will be spread all over the earth into every nation, tribe, and tongue. So many nations will have the seed of Israel in them. And out of them, out of all the nations of the earth, God will regather his nation of Israel. But not so for Ishmael. We can't have two seed lines carrying the same promise. So God promised a nation, which we know today as the Palestines, the Islamic nations, out of the seed of Ishmael. So then we have verse 14 to 18, the story how Abram sent Hagar away with only... I don't understand how Abram could do this. I love Abram. I love his story. I have so much respect for him, and I know he's my father in the faith. But he sent Hagar away with only a little bit of water and bread. I just don't understand that. I mean, this is his son. So I don't understand why he didn't at least pack them a donkey with a lot of water and bread. I don't know. But yeah, that's one of the things I'll ask Abraham maybe one day, when Yeshua reigns, and I meet Abraham if I have the opportunity. So Hagar thought that they were going to die, and she left her son under the bushes. Ishmael was 13 when Abram was circumcised. Remember, Abram was 99 years old when he was circumcised, and he was 100 when Isaac was born. So Ishmael was 14 when Isaac was born. And then Isaac was weaned, and Abram had the feast, and at the feast Sarah said, no longer, I want them to go away. So that's about 2 years old for Isaac. So Ishmael must have been about 16, if my calculations are correct. So I'm also not sure why did Hagar leave Ishmael under the shrubs? I mean, he was big enough not to be left like a little baby. So when the Bible says God said that he heard the voice of the boy, I don't think it was because it was a little baby crying. I mean, the Bible stories you see when you buy DVDs, or you look at the Bible books that you read to your children, it looks like Ishmael is a little baby that's left there under the bushes to die. But he was about 16 years old already. So I think he was praying, and that God heard his prayers. He heard the voice of Ishmael's prayers. So although Ishmael and Hagar were the origins of the Ishmaelites, whom we know today as the Palestines, the Muslim world, and we also know that they are symbolic of the bondage of people that chooses other options instead of listening to God. That whole thing we handled, where Abram's and Sarah's plans in the flesh through Hagar, and Hagar is the symbol of man-made plans compared to God's promises. And I know also that Ishmael definitely had the seed of the tree of knowledge in him, the seed of the serpent, the attitudes, the words, the spirit of the seed of the serpent. While Isaac, like Abel, like Jacob, like Joseph, had the seed of God in them, the doctrine, the spirit, the words of God. Although we know all of that, we also know that the Ishmaelites did have a promise on their lives from the God of Abraham. Because they come from Abraham. They're also the seed of Abraham. They are indeed our brothers. I like the saying that the kids use, "You're my brother from another mother." And this is what's happening with the Muslim world. They are our brothers in Abraham, but of course through Hagar and not through Sarah, who is the promised seed from Israel. And they also have promises for land and for territory. And we need to know and understand that, because we learned yesterday that God does not lie. So every promise he makes, he will always keep, even if it's to the Muslims. So they do, up to today, also claim that Abraham is their father. Now, we cannot take that away. We cannot deny the fact that Abraham is also the father of the Muslim nations. And they keep halal, we keep kosher. They keep Friday holy, we keep Saturday, Sabbath holy. There's so many things that we can talk about with our brothers. But because along the way they went onto the serpent seed's root, and they went into total paganism, although they can still claim Abraham as their father, they do not have the God of Abraham in their hearts, although they think they do. And it's difficult when you speak to Muslims, because they really believe that the God of Abraham is Allah, where we know it is Yahuwah, Yotevavhe. So again, just like Abraham stood on the hill looking out over Sodom, praying for our neighbors in our towns and our cities, we also need to remember our brother Ishmael, and we need to pray for them to come back to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and not the God that they think is through Abraham, Ishmael, and then through Muhammad.